Okay, so I guess this will be my last video for the week. Yeah, I'm recording this at just before 9 o'clock on Friday morning on the 13th, Friday the 13th. There was just an announcement about this update coming on Monday, this 2.0, some potential for some positive news. I'm not going to go into details of it yet because we've been wrong before. I wanted to talk primarily about revenue stream and why we do what we do as a third-party publisher. Now, it should be noted, in my opinion, there are about three types of publishers for role-playing games. You have your top tier. You got your Wizards of the Coast. That's basically the King Koopa on this whole situation. Then you have these second tier, which are these very, very large, with dozens of staff members, a major player. You got your Paizo, your Cobalt Press, and there's very few in this category. It's probably like 4 or 5 classes if I keep on doing it this way. Their next category are small operations, 1, 2, 3 staff members that make actually really good money to the point where they don't have to carry another job, that they can full-time be a game designer. And you'd be surprised how large this is. This is bigger. This is a bigger category. 20 years ago, I had a conversation with someone at Green Rotor, and he said more people walked on the moon than had a full-time job as a game designer. Thanks to Kickstarter, that is not even close to being the case. I imagine there's probably hundreds of people that take their entirety of their income from game design. And that's fantastic. That's a wonderful thing, the fact that we've expanded and democratized this industry the way we have. The last category are people that, regardless of how much money that they make from role-playing games, it is still technically a hobby. It is something that they divert time when they have time away from a primary vocation. Like my problem, and I stated why people shouldn't abandon D&D, this fourth category can walk away very easily. They can switch systems. They can do whatever they want because ultimately they don't need the money that comes from role-playing games. This is their hobby, and they're just doing these things on the side. And I've been trying to stress to that category specifically, don't just walk away because you can, because you are basically abandoning the other, other categories, the third and the second, the ones that do rely on this. And big companies in the second category, the Cobalt Presses and the Paizos, they can divert. A lot of them have their own proprietary systems. They have IPs, named IPs, that attract people regardless of systems. So it's that third category, the people that are able to have this be a career, but they're not very big. And so a lot of these don't have IPs. They don't have proprietary systems, or if they do, there's a very low adoption of that system. The problem with this category, beyond the fact that it is the second largest, the fourth category, the ones who do this as a hobby, they're the largest. Like everybody on DM's Guild is part of that category. I don't think there's a single person on DM's Guild that takes all their income from role-playing games, unless it's a company that has diverted or expanded into that category, but really have their primary income stream is from regular books. So I'm part of that category, and we are slaves to the market, and that's an unfortunate thing. We can't walk away because this is a revenue stream, and we don't have the clout or power to generate income off of a proprietary system or off an IP that we have access to. And that creates a situation where we have to go with the flow. In 2008, 4th edition came out. We just came on the scene. We had it was a homebrew company up until 2008, and then we released the first Amethyst as for D20. 4th edition came out a month later. We switched over, and that was our attempt to try to be legit. Now I was still category 4. I was still a hobbyist, and regardless of the success of Foundations, which wasn't a success for Goodman Games, it was a success for us. Evolution and Ultramodern 4, which was actually quite successful. But it wasn't until 5th edition came out, and the speed in which 5th edition encompassed the industry was quite shocking. Remember the fact that in, I would say, 2012 or 2013 or so, Paizo had the larger market share, but that still wasn't particularly big. It wasn't a huge market share. It was not a very good scene, and people was just like, well, just write for multiple systems. And you don't realize how much of a nightmare that is to write for different systems. Amethyst, when we ran our Kickstarter in 2014, this industry was still fractured. 5th edition wasn't out yet. And we published for every system that we could have that were big. Savage World, Fate Core, 13th Age, 4th edition, and eventually 5th edition and Pathfinder. That was a nightmare. For one, it's very difficult to switch systems and trying not to carry over language from one to the other. So you basically have to unlearn a system and create, and in fact, for me, I cannot keep two systems 100% in memory. I have to basically relearn it. If you're going to ask me to differentiate the specifics between Pathfinder First Edition, Fourth Edition, and Third Edition, I would have some issues. In fact, I was still having issues going into Fifth Edition, and you can see some of those artifacts in some of my early Fifth Edition works. For example, I would say the word free action, and a free action is not a term that's defined in Fifth Edition. It is very difficult to write for multiple systems, and as a result, the 2014 Kickstarter took nearly 4 years to finish. Now, that being said, it was 5 core books, 5 expansion books. So I was putting out a lot of content, but it still took 4 years. And my backers were incredibly patient, and I love them for it. In 2019, I walked away from my career in electronics retail. I also hated electronics retail, even though I had been doing it by that point for nearly 30 years. And I walked away from that to try to see if I can do this full time because I was seeing how successful the Kickstarters were. And I did it for the first thing that was the safest product out there, which was Ultramodern 5. Ultramodern 5 originally came out in 2016. It exploded. Like I said, it got copper in a day, silver in a day, it got to gold in a week, and it got to platinum within 2 months. I made more money in a month off of that than I had in the previous 8. I would say in the previous year, actually, it might have been more accurate. And I realized, maybe this market is large enough that maybe I could try to do this full time. And so that's what I did. In May of 2019, I ran the Ultramodern 5 Kickstarter. It crossed 100K. 2020, we had the COVID lockdown. And as it turns out, it ended up being a boon for me because I didn't have to worry about having to go into a job that could be cut anyway. And I ran the Affinity Kickstarter, which also raised 100K. So I was able, once again, to carry this through. And I am one of those people that is a slave to that system. So whenever people say, just write for Pathfinder, people kind of forget that you can go on to stuff like Roll20 and other systems, and they'll tell you the percentage of people playing and what they're playing. And right now, up until recently, 5th edition had about a 60 or more % market share. It's huge, especially considering how much the industry has expanded. It has exploded, and 5th edition has 60% of that share. And that gives you an idea how massive it is. The fact that the 5th edition Kickstarters that don't have an IP attached to them can still make 6 figures on Kickstarter, where most of the time you have to have an IP attached to it. I've had people come up to me and say, just go OSR or go and write for Savage World. And I always go to them like that. I have to look at the numbers of my sales. In an average month, I will sometimes have no 13th Age sales. There are months that pass where I've had no Fate sales. And there's even been a few months where I've had no Savage World sales. Now, has there been a month where I've made no sales from these books? No, I've always made some sales from something. Like this month, for example, I have some sales in almost every category. But even if you add all of those up, that accounts to maybe $100. Like that's how little it is. And you compare that to what I sell off the 5th edition stuff. 5th edition will account for 99% of my sales. If you are in this category, or even if in the 4th category, this is hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of publishers. Whenever someone says, just do this, just abandon D&D, you don't understand how we cannot do that. I've been seeing dozens and dozens of comments online from people that I believe either don't understand or don't have empathy in the situation, where they simply say, just abandon D&D, just switch to OSR, just switch to Pathfinder, or they say, I want a market with 20 dominant systems. I don't want D&D carrying everything. They'll say D&D is half-baked already. They want to see this wide mix. The issue is that that kills these bottom 2 categories because we don't have the money to pay for an IP. So we survive on trying to publish rules for the dominant systems. When you have an environment where the vast majority of role players are playing the same game, it is remarkably easy for us to write for one system, and then we can concentrate on creating the worlds and the settings and adventures and not spend our time having to adapt one book to 5 different systems. Pathfinder, unfortunately, made the situation worse for them. They had a huge market share with Pathfinder. Then they split it with Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2nd edition. And so that becomes even more difficult. So what am I supposed to do? publish Amethyst for 1 and 2 Pathfinder on top of Fate Core and Savage World. That's it. I didn't want to spend too much time on this because obviously I want to get back to writing. I want to get back into creating, but I wanted people to understand why we third-party publishers are so married to D&D. Let's say in some kind of pie-in-the-sky, wonderful fantasy world where the industry was 40% D&D, 40% Pathfinder, and 20% the rest. I could switch gears to Pathfinder. In fact, I'd probably be publishing for both systems anyway, and I wouldn't worry about it. And to make matters worse, when people say, just adopt Black Flag, which is this new system that Kobold has announced, you forget that how long did it take for 5th edition to come out? How long did it take for Paizo's Pathfinder to come out? At the best case scenario, we're not going to see this Black Flag for at least a year. And by then, most of these Category 3 publishers will be gone. I know you're angry at Wizards of the Coast, and you have the right to be. I know you're angry at Hasbro, and you have the right to be. But to toss your D&D books metaphorically in the trash and then move on to another system, I know you're making a political statement. I know you have personal anger towards this system. But by doing that, you're basically burying this Category 3 publishers, of which there are hundreds like me. This video is not about me approaching you hand in hand, asking for money. This is an explanation about my situation, what I do for a living, and why I'm so married to D&D and why I can't walk away from 5th edition. As long as 5th edition has that market share, I don't have a choice to write for somebody else, because if I do, I'm not making the money I need to survive. So that's what I wanted to explain. When people make repeated comments of us walking away from 5th edition D&D or trying to push this this idea of splitting the industry into 20 systems that all have a say in this thing, you don't understand where we are at as small third-party publishers. So I have to write for 5th edition, and I will have to continually write for 5th edition until that market share fades. And that's why I'm worried that if it fades and we don't have a dominant system to replace it, I'm back to where I was in 2014, where I'm writing for multiple systems. But that's basically what I wanted to say. I obviously have edited this video to death to make sure the point comes across. And I've had a lot more views and a lot more subscribers in the last week. And it's probably because I've been part of this fight, and I continue to be part of this fight. And I'm going to head off. I'm going to go back to work. And hopefully by Monday, when we see this new update from Wizards, it's something that hopefully allows us to heal and move forward. If not, well, we still have the Paizo announcement. And I am hoping that it does what I hope it does, and that is allow us to continually create content for 5th edition without being beholden to Wizards of the Coast. Because ultimately, as I say I've said numerous times, D&D is bigger than Wizards. It's bigger than Hasbro, and it'll be here long after those companies have faded away. This has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina.